Hello, my name is Greg Cottrell. I am a researcher and educator interested in learner analytics. My interest in learner analytics began when I was a high school assistant principal working in a school that had recently adopted a one-to-one Chromebook initiative. As an assistant principal at the time, my job was to address inappropriate online activity. I received notifications every time that a student went to an inappropriate site. These sites may contain adult content or have foul language. Sometimes they had dangerous content, such as a student was searching for self-harm or suicidal information, and those students I would refer to counseling. And I also had many false positives that I received that was just basically typical teenage behaviors that keep an assistant principal like me at the time very, very busy. But as I would investigate these notifications, I would see a complete log of all of the online activity that a student conducted. And let me tell you something, it was shocking. It was not uncommon to see a student with over 1,000 page views in a 24-hour period. Students were online at all hours of the night. Netflix and YouTube were amongst the most popular sites, and students were not afraid to search for anything online. And I mean anything. I could always tell when it was prom season because it seemed like every girl in school was searching for a sexy prom dress or nude colored stockings. Sexy and nude were both flag terms. As an assistant principal, my job was to address inappropriate behaviors, and I did just that. But my job was also to be an instructional leader. I knew that hidden somewhere within those lists of 1,000 different page views for everything from the sexy prom dresses to YouTube to Facebook was information about student online learning behaviors that we as educators could use to better inform how we design learning processes. It was at that point that I began to research, write, and develop ways for teachers to access this information in a way that is both meaningful, actionable, and ethical. The first point that I want to make about online behaviors is that online browsing history contains extremely personal information, but it also contains a vast amount of information. If you do not believe me, imagine that you had to turn in a complete log of your online activity to the next person that you met, or maybe on your next first date, or job interview, or to your current boss. While in many cases it would make for some interesting first date conversations, most people would not be comfortable with this idea. But imagine the window into a person's life that this information would provide you. The things you would know about that person. You would know the books that they read, the movies that they watch, the political affiliation of the news that they read, the time that they spend surfing the web, how much time they spend surfing social media, the health issues they are researching, as well as any of the other curiosities and oddities that people explore online. There is little doubt that if you took time to analyze a person's online behaviors, that you would have a deeper understanding of that person. The theory behind this talk is that if teachers spent time accessing and learning and analyzing about student online learning behaviors, so let me stress the fact, learning behaviors, that they would have a deeper understanding of who their students are as learners. While we're on the topic of data, let's talk about Google. Google handles more than 1 billion searches every day. It has in excess of 70 offices in more than 40 countries with more than 57,000 employees. It is estimated that Google makes more than $50 billion a year, and it does this mainly by selling advertisements. Google is really just the largest advertising company in the world, and the reason it is so successful at advertising is because it knows so much about each individual user. Therefore, it is able to place ads for items and services in front of people who are likely to purchase them. Google gains their knowledge through data analysis. Google, Amazon, Facebook, YouTube, Netflix, they all are able to do this with very little or no human interaction, all through data. All data, no human interaction is what they use to understand their users. Teachers working in a one-to-one environment also have access to much of the same information that these companies do. But teachers, do you think you would know your students as well as Google might? If I had a Google analyst in this room, and I had a teacher in the room, and I asked that Google analyst and teachers questions like, what time does your student go to bed at night? What are their homework habits? What are their concerns? What are their online interests? Who do you think would have a better answer to those questions? Again, Google was able to become so successful through its ability to understand users, and it does so simply by looking at data without human interaction. Teachers are on the other end of the spectrum. Teachers get to know their students largely through human interaction with very, very little based on data. Google's employment of 57,000 seems impressive, but when you factor in that there are more than 7 billion people in the world, you realize that this is just one Google employee for every 130,000 people in the world. To put that into perspective, the capacity of the largest stadium in the United States, Michigan Stadium, is 133,000 people. That is just one Google employee for every stadium full of people. The current teacher-to-student ratio in the United States is about 16-1, which is roughly about the capacity of the first 2 rows behind home plate at Dodgers Stadium. So, there are more than 3 million teachers in the United States. It's 53 times larger than Google. Imagine what would happen if these 3 million teachers started to blend the knowledge that they have through personal interactions with students with an analysis of student online behaviors. Sliding the needle down a little bit. I am not here to argue that teachers should become Google. I think that would be a terrible idea. But I am here to encourage teachers to slide their needle down this continuum of understanding a little bit, to base their understanding of students on data, not just solely on human interaction. Specifically, the purpose of this talk is to make a case for an increased use of online browser history data to provide formative information to educators about student online learning experiences. This data provides evidence and insight about student online experiences through which educators can glean a better understanding of student learning. This data is the most over-collected yet underutilized piece of information that exists in the educational system today. So let's talk about what this online learning behavior data actually looks like. One of my favorite quotes is from political scientist Herbert Simon, who stated that a wealth of information leads to a poverty of attention. This is certainly the case when it comes to online learning behavior data. We have literally seen a bonanza of this information with the advent of one-to-one computing and monitoring software. But we don't know what to do with it. So to illustrate this point, let's look at a sample student day. I have not conducted research, nor am I familiar with research that attempts to quantify the amount of time that a student spends online. So I just picked the first student on my server list and I pulled their information for a given day. So this particular student had access to 227 page views from 7:04 a.m. was when they first logged on. They logged off at 10:40 p.m. They conducted 33 Google searches, and during this time there was about 4.5 active hours where they were actively engaged online. So what can a teacher do with this information? Not much. Maybe encourage a student to go to bed a little earlier. It's too much information. It's the proverbial drinking from a fire hose, especially when you consider the fact that a teacher probably has 100 different students, all with 100 different and unique learning experiences online. What I have found to be extremely interesting as a researcher and impactful as a teacher is what happens when we sort and filter online student learning behavior based on learning content, and we provide that information back to the teacher. In other words, if you remove all of the searches for sexy prom dresses and YouTube videos and social media posts, and you sort the remaining content based on topic and subject area, you are able to then provide the history teacher with information about what that student did for history class. You're able to provide the science teacher with information about what that student did for science class. So by sorting learner experiences, in this example, I am able to show this teacher that the student had spent 15 minutes conducting their assignment for this assignment, which was actually to write a paragraph about the impact of Kate Chopin on feminism. The students spent 15 minutes outside of school working on it. They conducted 2 Google searches, one for feminism and one for Kate Chopin impact, and they visited 9 websites. So some people may still say, so what? What can I do with this information? Well, what if I said that the teacher had planned this assignment to occur over the weekend because they were expecting it to take 60 minutes? What if I said that during the previous class, the teacher had spent half of that class defining and discussing what feminism was, and the first thing that this student did was to look up the definition for it? What if I pointed out that 50% of this student's time was actually spent typing up their answers within the Google document, so only about 7.5 minutes was actually spent accessing new content and new information, and of that, a portion of that time was spent just simply defining feminism. So if the purpose of this assignment was to gain background information about Kate Chopin, do we think it actually accomplished that? That's questionable. If we took this one step farther, and we compared this student's time to the time of the rest of the class, so if I had a log of the entire class, and we see that students spent a majority of their time in Google Docs typing up their answers, if this is our Google Docs, was it really a research assignment or was it a writing assignment? Which leads us to the question of, if students are able to access and find this information online so quickly, is it really an effective assignment at all? Well, it depends on the purpose, and it really depends on what the teacher is trying to accomplish with this assignment. What I've found to be very important in looking at student data is really understanding that teacher's objective for that assignment. So as an outsider coming in, I cannot really provide the same type of value and insight that the actual teacher in that classroom is able to glean from looking at this type of information. This is just one example of what one teacher can see for one assignment. It's meant to illustrate the types of questions that we can start asking when we start looking at student online learner data. As a current high school administrator, one of my categories that I use as a basis for teacher evaluations is learning environment. As more and more students are spending time online, as educators, we need to follow them online and into that learning environment and start asking questions about the experiences that students are having online. I stand before you not with a silver bullet that will fix all of the woes of the educational system, but simply to spark an interest in finding value in learner analytics. It is my hope that my talk today inspires you to start asking questions about your student online learning experiences and to start looking for innovative new ways to curate, design, and develop ways for students to learn online. Thank you very much.